What's up, everybody? Wherever you may be in life's journey, I'm glad I get to be here with you and that you are here on this earth. This is a pop-up edition of the Rise to the Occasion podcast. Every once in a while, I'll get a really great question from someone a part of the Catholic Mentor community, and it will be a question that I think would be helpful for everyone. So I just pop up on the pod and answer the question. And today's question is really kind of like a hidden topic within the church. It's one where if you bring up the topic, most people have an opinion about it, and most people have a strong opinion about it, but we almost never discuss it. And it's really important because it like most things, the answer to this question has a big impact on your spiritual journey, and there's a great temptation to go to either end of the spectrum. And the church, as it usually does, has a both and approach to this particular question. And the question is, how do I reconcile the modern trend toward self-stewardship and taking care of the body and honoring and treating the body as a temple? How do I reconcile that with a long history of saintly asceticism? What I mean by saintly asceticism is, you look at a lot of the lives of the saints, you find asceticism, you find severe self-discipline, you find severe acts of really attempts to tame the body and tame the desires of the flesh. One of my favorite saints, my patron saint, the saint whose name I took when I was baptized, is Saint John Vianney. And Saint John Vianney, I mean, he wore a hair shirt. He didn't sleep a lot. He basically ate nothing but potatoes, if he ate anything at all, going on severe fasts. He didn't really sleep on a bed. He didn't really sleep at all. He was really aesthetically inclined, where he would go through these severe fasts and sort of these severe actions of taming the body. And he's not even the most severe among the Catholic saints, but he is common. There are if you look up and down the lives of the saints, a lot of them engaged in asceticism. A lot of them engaged in sort of these things that ultimately were pretty harsh on the body in the name of taming the flesh and the desires of the body. So how do we reconcile this? How do we be authentically Catholic? How do we pursue holiness in this modern context? And what do we do with this real push in the modern age to honor the dignity of the body, along with this significant history of asceticism in the church? And like anything in Catholicism, there's a both and, as well as a temptation to go to one end of the spectrum or the other in an unhealthy way. So the church has been adamant about two things. One, taming the passions of the body is a vital part of the Christian journey. It's a vital part of it, okay? And two, when Jesus became man and he was resurrected in the body, it confirmed the long Jewish tradition of belief that the body has dignity, that the resurrection is a body and soul resurrection, that the body has dignity, and that the body has an important role to play in salvation and in your path toward holiness. And so we have to find this middle ground. We can't go all the way to one side and basically just say that the body is no good, and we have to basically beat it to death. We have to beat it into submission in intense, really rough ways. Or we can't go in the other direction and be like, the body is so amazing, we have to follow the body in everything. Like, the body contains truth. The body contains what I desire. The body, if I follow the body, I'll be happy. Like, we can't go to either ends of the spectrum. We have to fall into both and. So let's talk about both ends of the spectrum through the lens of the saints. Okay, because the saints, they tell what could be at first seen as a complicated history of how you balance asceticism with honoring the dignity of the body. So let's first talk, I might butcher this name, but there's been a heresy for a really long time among Christians, and it's called Manichaeism. And Manichaeism is an early heresy that taught that the spirit is good and matter, including the body, is evil. It is evil. There are two gods that are locked into battle, and salvation and being on the side of good is entering into the spiritual and rejecting everything that is physical. Saint Augustine was a follower of this philosophy for almost a decade, a little over 9 years. And it was a significant part of his conversion to Christianity that he actually walked away from this belief. He walked away from this belief that the body is evil and that you need extreme acts of asceticism in order to put the body in its proper place, which is evil, and that the body is the enemy and you have to destroy the body so that the spirit can soar. He rejected that. He rejected that. He actually warned against it. He talked about how if you lean toward one direction too far, if you lean toward asceticism too much, that it becomes a great temptation to actually cloak your life in pride and in false humility. It's like, look at me, I do all of this physical mortification. I go on these long fasts. I beat up my body intentionally. I wear a hair shirt. I do all these things. And it's like, that is actually an act of pride, says Saint Augustine. So, and he really pointed to the incarnation, like the word becoming flesh. For him, it was very much an intellectual conversion, right? If the body were evil, God wouldn't have taken a body. And so the incarnation crushes this heresy of Manichaeanism. So we have Saint Augustine having a conversion. And part of his conversion process was a conversion toward honoring the dignity of the body, right? Honoring the dignity of the body. I think the best example of this, well, let me back up here. Let me go to the opposite end. Not really the opposite end. Let me go toward the holy way of leaning toward asceticism. Saint Rita, Saint John Vianney. They are people who denied themselves out of love for God. Their fasting, their penance. It was quiet. It was humble. It was never for self-glory, but it was a form of trying to create a union with God, a deep connection with God. My favorite example of this, and then we'll get to then I'll get to the ideal. My favorite example of this is actually Saint Francis of Assisi. St. Francis of Assisi is probably the person who exemplifies the most about a saint who went far and above in bodily mortification. Like, he is probably the person who did it the most. So for years, he slept on stone. He fasted to the extreme. He rolled around in thorns. He jumped into thorn bushes. Like, he would get naked and he would jump into thorn bushes. But at the end of his life, when he had taken his life into account and he had like really done serious examination of the way in which he was living and pursuing God, you know what he did? He apologized to his body. For pretty much from the moment he was converted until this moment, he called his body brother ass. You know, slow, stubborn, but faithful. And he repented for having mistreated his body. Think about how powerful that is. St. Francis of Assisi is probably like the person you go to when you think of inspiration of different ways that you can mortify the body. Jumping into cold water, jumping into thorn bushes naked, rolling around in stuff that would, you know, like make you itch, and sleeping on stone when he could be sleeping on hay or even a bed, right? He apologized to brother ass. Like, he was glad that he followed God's will in rejecting riches and taking on the call of poverty, which was a way of mortifying the body and a way of mortifying the passions. He took vows of chastity, which was about mortifying the passions and taming the body. But he went too far. He took it too far. He repented of the way he treated Brother Ass. So both Augustine and Francis of Assisi, they both took things too far and then came back toward the holy middle, right? Francis of Assisi didn't say, like, the body is now God. Neither did Augustine. Instead, they put the body within the proper framework. It is not a source of evil. It is to be tamed. Our earthly passions are to be tamed, but our body is not meant to be mistreated. Okay, now let's talk about the saintly example of really what the ideal is. And it's an ideal in a sneaky way. And the ideal is actually Saint Therese of Lisieux. So Saint Therese of Lisieux tried physical mortification. She wore a small chain. I can't remember if it was a small chain shirt or a small chain that caused her pain as she walked and she moved. But in connection with her spiritual director, she discerned that God was asking her not to break her body, that her body was fragile, and that the attempts for mortification were actually temptations toward pride. And so she, in walking with her spiritual director, chose to mortify her will, not her body. And of course, she was mortifying her body, right? She was in a convent in the 19th century, right? It didn't have central air. There was constant opportunities for mortification of her body, but it was natural mortification. It was leaning into what was natural. They didn't sleep on the best mattresses. Like, she rejoiced when she got sick. She denied herself taking the best piece of food, but it was all about mortifying her will. So she would spend time and joyfully embrace spending time with people she didn't want to spend time with, to mortify her will, to be obedient to her superiors, to be patient, to practice big acts of love in hidden ways. She said that she moved from being a soldier to a sergeant in God's army through this process. And it's really important to recognize, we don't actually know the interior life of the saints. So when I give this answer and when I give this ideal, it's not because I know the interior life of Augustine or Francis or Therese. We can get some insights, like with St. Francis apologizing to Brother Ass and apologizing to the way in which he mortified his body. But for the most part, we don't actually really know about the inner lives of the saints. What we do know is that when you look at the life and the upbringing of someone like St. Francis, who had a father who literally beat him, who literally implanted within his mind and in his very self and his conscience that his body was bad and to be beaten. And you contrast that with St. Therese of Lisieux, whose father to her was her king, and she was his princess. And they had this very close and gentle and loving and affectionate and healthy relationship. And so, yeah, Therese did a little stint with trying to wear a chain or some kind of physical mortification. And she said quickly, as I mentioned, that it was not what she was called to do. So she really moved from this soldier to this sergeant. And Francis made that movement at the end of his life, after a whole life of throwing himself in pricker bushes and stuff like that. And so we can't judge their interior life, but we can talk about these things in a really objective way, which is that Francis and Augustine found this healthy middle, but so did Therese of Lisieux, and she found it a lot earlier. And the other thing we need to look at that's really important about Therese, and really important about a lot of the saints, is that they had spiritual directors. They had people who knew and understand the inner workings of their life, and they took on mortifications. They didn't do it willy-nilly. They did it really intentionally, under the obedience of a spiritual director who helped guide them in the mortification of their body in healthy ways. It really is something to be done under the guidance of a wise mentor and spiritual figure. It's not something to be done really just willy-nilly. Because like, if you're called to fast, like, yeah, you're called to fast. Like, as a church, we mortify our body all throughout Lent. We give something up, we do something hard, we fast from meat on Fridays, we do big fasts on Ash Wednesday and Good Friday. Like, we have set moments where we mortify the body, but we also have feasts in our church, right? Where we celebrate. We have retreats in our church where we rest and we rejuvenate. So we really have this middle ground. The last thing I'm going to talk about here is St. John Paul II and his theology of the body, which St. John Paul II talked about this. He was like, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. Like, that's what I'm doing. I'm standing on the shoulder of the hard work done by St. Francis and Therese of Lisieux and St. Augustine and their conversions. And so St. John Paul II said that we don't just have a vocation in life, we are a vocation. And we communicate our vocation in and through our body. And that vocation is to make the invisible God visible. And he wrote in his theology of the body, in his addresses, he wrote, the body and it alone is capable of making visible what is invisible, the spiritual and the divine. So your body is not a shell. It's a source of divine revelation. It's not something to be discarded. It's actually where we encounter and receive the gift of love. Right? So grace builds on nature, and our ability to, our capacity to express and to make the invisible God visible to the people around us, our capacity for love is impacted by the body. So when we talk about good self-stewardship, of getting good sleep, of eating the right kind of foods, it's not out of selfishness. It's not out of inner greed. St. John Paul II talks about it as, you have self-possession for self-gift. You do your best to have a healthy body and a healthy mind for the sake of self-gift. You sleep well, you eat whole foods, you exercise, you move the body, you drink lots of water for the sake of increasing your capacity for love. And that's the important distinction, right? All of this comes down to, what are we doing when we mortify the body? What are we doing when we take care of the body? If we're taking care of the body because we worship the body, that's no good. If we're mortifying the body because we want to puff our chests up and we want to have the perception of being holier than thou, or if we mortify the body out of a hatred of the body, out of a demeaning of the body, neither of those things are good. What is healthy is, I am seeking the kingdom of God. I am seeking to make the invisible God visible with my life. I am seeking to follow the will of God in my day-to-day, which means that fasting is an important part of that. Like, chastity is a form of fasting. Mortifying the body, or tempering the body's desire, is an important part of that. But so is taking care of your body so that you can make of your life a self-gift. So this is really the path that we want to walk down to the best of our ability. We want to use the guidance of the church, and we want to use the guidance of a spiritual director to help us know what season of life we're in. Are we in a season of rest and rejuvenation where we need to really build up strength and really take care of ourselves and gain a sense of self-possession so that we can make of our lives a self-gift? Or are we in a position and in a point in time where we really need to focus on tempering the passions and tempering the earthly desires of our flesh in a way that is healthy and prudent, in a way that St. Francis would have been able to articulate at his conversion at the end, in a way that helps, as St. Therese of Lisieux would say, really mortify the will and temper the will so that the will can be aligned with God. We need help distinguishing one from the other, and when it's the right season or the right moment in time in our lives, it's not something to be taken on just by ourselves. So we need good spiritual guides and good spiritual mentors. And when we look at the lives of the saints, it can be easy to just say, okay, the saints were all about mortifying the body, so I should mortify the body and I should discard all this stuff of the modern age of getting good sleep and having good self-stewardship and taking care of yourself and indulging the body and all this stuff. And it's like, no. The saints actually stand in the holy middle, Tame your passions, but make sure you give of your life, you make of your life the biggest self-gift you can, which is impacted by the capacity of your physical body. So hopefully this is a blessing to you. I know it's been a blessing to me. If you have any questions that you want to send my way for one of these pop-up Rise to the Occasion podcasts, please send them my way, and I'd be happy to respond. Until then, may God bless you, and may you always remember that you were made to do hard things.